So Beth, you'll let me know when you want me to talk, or you're going to go
Yes,
first.
I'll introduce you. And as a matter of fact, I'll do that right now.
Okay.
Welcome, everybody, to our TED Talks, our bed talks, sorry. Um, I am so excited to have Alex here. Alex is a wonderful friend. He is a well-known establishment in the pet care industry and just an incredibly intelligent person to have any conversations with. I feel like I learn an immense amount every time we get to talk. Um, Alex has done a lot of work on time studies in his work with Kinn clean bowls, in how you can save a lot of money if you know how much time you're spending on certain processes in your business. So this is actually something that I hope I get to learn a lot about to improve my own business. But without further ado, I will let Alex take over. And if anybody has questions, feel free to post them in the chat, and we'll make sure Alex gets to them as we get through the presentation. So thank you so much, Alex. I'm so glad that you're here with us.
Well, thank you, Beth. I am honored to be here today. I think you were talking to somebody else when you were describing them, but anyway,
Oh,
Beth is an amazing pet pro as well, and it's an honor to be a friend of hers. And what I'm really excited about today is we get to talk about a subject that is not only one of my favorite topics, but I think is something that should be near and dear to everybody who is a pet pro. And that is because time is money. So we're going to talk about using time studies to improve facility operations today. And I want to point out that we've done our best to make this structured it so that it not only will be relevant and appeal to pet care businesses which are for profit, so pet resorts, pet boarding, daycare, grooming, etc. But it also has a lot of information that is germane and it should be very relevant to animal shelters because even though they're nonprofit, a lot of them have a lot of opportunities to improve their finances. And if they could do that, we would all say thanks to God because that would result in many more adoptions. So, with that as a starting point, I don't want to spend a lot of time on myself. So, just to build a little bit on what Beth told you, um, I've been in business for over 30 years. I started my career working for companies like Braun, Gillette, Sara Lee, Sylvan Learning Centers, and ran businesses out of Spain, Germany, Scandinavia, and the United States, and did some global work. And then my focus was really in product innovation, product and brand innovation. And then 15 years ago, I founded with my wife Dee Dee and our two dogs, Kinn, and Kinn does not have anything to do with my last name, despite what you may think. It's pets are family, pets are kin. We added a second in to remind you to nurture your relationship with your furry four-legged friend. So, with that being said, what are we going to cover today? Well, we're going to talk about everything today is about time studies, and we're going to cover five areas: the operational problem, the time study method, which is going to be really important for you to understand. We're going to talk about the problem solution application. Yes, our company does make the clean bowl, and one of the things I do want to dwell on for a second now, we are going to talk about Ken Clean Bowl as an example of a labor solution, and we want to give you enough detail so hopefully you can decide whether or not you want to learn more or not. But one of the things I want to make really, really clear is virtually everything we're covering today with time studies is applicable and is relevant to virtually any process at your facility that involves human labor. So yes, we're giving, some bowl examples. We're going to give some other examples. But even if you determine that Ken Cleanball, you don't want to hear any more about it, everything that we're talking about would apply to countless other processes that involve labor. So we hope you'll find this useful and be able to use it across your facility. and then we're going to talk about the action plan. So the operational problem. And by the way, a lot of these slides have quite a few words on them, and I'm aware of that. Typically, this has more, most of these slides have more copy than I normally put on there. And the reason we did this is, first of all, we have a great designer who deserves a lot of the credit for what you're like. Her name is Bridget. I think she might even be on the with us today. But anyway, the reason we put this in there is because time study is about the details. If we sit here and talk theoretically at a high strategic level, but we don't get into the details, it's not going to help you. So I would appreciate your patience and that in quite a few slides, there's quite a bit of copy. I'm not going to obviously read everything. I would put you to sleep immediately, but the reason it's there is so if that area is of particular interest, and if you want to go back and watch it again, you'll have all the detail you need. So again, I'm not going to read every line, but I want you to understand because business is about details, and so that's why it's there. So why does the topic of time studies even matter? Well, the truth is, whether you are a pet resort or whether you are an animal shelter or a daycare or what have you, most facilities are losing time they never measure. And if you don't measure the task, you cannot fully understand what it is costing your team. And I have met countless founders, CEOs, general managers, whatever you want to call it, who claim they know everything about their business and they know exactly what the time is. And I'm not trying to be arrogant, I'm not trying to be unkind, but you find out that more often than not, they're just wrong. They're estimating, and that's something that's not sufficient to optimize your business. So if virtually every business is losing time, they never measure. We think this is something that everybody should be aware of and come up with some actionable solutions. So the bigger operational question that goes behind that is where is your team's time really going? And I do want to point out that a time study is not just about speed. It's really more about visibility and truly understanding what is involved in the processes. And as it says here on the slide, a time study can help answer many valuable questions. Which tasks or chores take longer than you think they should, which ones create bottlenecks, which ones distract the staff away from the pets or the animals, which ones create too much overtime, and the list goes on. So it's really, really important to understand where your staff's time is going. And guess what? If you're an animal shelter, a lot of this also applies to some of your volunteers because even though you may not be paying them money, their time is also very valuable to you as well as your facility. And so, moving on, so what is a time study? Well, the simple definition, as is you can see in the bottom of this slide, is a time study shows the difference between what a task feels like and what it actually costs. And what it feels like is what if I were to ask many of you, that's what you would share. And again, I'm not trying to be condescending, but that's not really the best way to run your business. So what we're really going to be talking to about today is measuring the real labor, and that includes how long a chore takes. Make sure you include all the steps involved, and this might get a little bit dry and boring. I'm going to have to tell you how many steps are typically involved and how often people skip them. And we're going to talk about who needs to do the work. We're going to talk about materials and equipment are required, and we have good news in that area. Less is more. And so that is what further explanation of what a time study is. And you might be wondering, well, why should my facility use time studies? Why do time studies even matter? Well, again, whether you're for profit or whether you're a nonprofit, time studies help facility leaders to improve their scheduling, their pricing, which is a huge opportunity in the for-profit area, pricing for services. It allows you to allocate your staff's time a lot better than you may be doing today. And again, we're not trying to be critical, we're just trying to be very importantly, it lets you compare current processes, and they could be any one of many different processes that you're doing today versus alternatives that you could have coming down the road. And the list goes on, as you can see. So, if you're serious about your business, we think you should be aware of time studies and use them when it is important to keep your business optimized. And a specific problem that we're going to talk about now, and this is said politely, staff time is very often focused on low value task. And even for nonprofits, if you can get, if you're at even if you're at a shelter, if you can get your staff to work on higher value tasks, everybody's going to be better off. And the staff time is so often spent on these low value tasks. And one of the problems is the hidden cost of necessary work is not always obvious, and very often it is hard to even figure out. And again, facilities pay your staff and volunteers on things that don't necessarily or aren't necessarily the best for the outcomes for the dogs or the cats. They certainly don't always improve the care. And for the for-profits, you're probably have your staff working on things that don't bring in enough revenue. And these some examples which are on here. Yes, we have washing bowls, but there's so many other processes that go across your facility where all of these things would still be applicable to you. And we're going to talk about a sorting laundry time study in just a moment. So hopefully everybody understands that they do have hidden costs, that they probably have their allocation of their staff's time not optimized. So hopefully this can be of good use to you. And I guess the solution to the problem we just talked about is make sure that you measure before you make the changes. And I'm going to say this until I'm kind of green in the face. But the principle is do not guess, measure, because guessing is not good enough in this day and age. As we all know, there's a lot of inflation going on, creating pricing pressure and cost pressure. So anything you can do to get more data would be better for your business. So before you're changing a process, what we would recommend you do is you focus on what the current process is costing you. And the only way to do that is to measure. And then you're going to figure out not only how much time it takes, but then you can quantify it into dollars and then figure out how often the task repeats itself, etc. So basically, you can measure in time units as well as in dollars to figure out what you're doing today because you really need to know that before you can look at anything to improve your business. And now we're going to talk. And by the way, I think, Beth, you wanted me to mention to people that if they do have questions, that if they do have them, they can send it. Did they send them to you, Beth? Is that how it works?
No, post them in the chat, and then I'll find a nice place to interrupt you to ask the question.
Sounds great. It's never an interruption, by the way. Sounds good. So the time study method. Well, again, I want to stress that time studies apply across the whole facility. It's not just about bowls. It could be about anything. And also, you can see on this screen lodging and daycare operations. Some of you are probably from that space. Some of you are probably from shelter or animal care operations. And the point is, anything that goes on involving labor at your facility would fall under the spectrum of doing time studies. So we wanted to stress that again. And we also want to make sure that you understand that these processes that we have listed under these different areas of pet care, this is not intended to be a complete list. These are just some of the types of processes that may be applicable, but if you run your own business, you probably can recognize and think of countless more. And to give you a couple of examples here, the first one I'm going to give you is a laundry time study by Eve Molzon. And if you know Eve, she has been around the pet care industry for quite a while. She's based out of the Midwest. She's a very successful lady. She
Actually, Eve was a former guest speaker on one of our webinars, so we can link to her webinar if anyone wants to see who Eve is. She's wonderful.
she is wonderful, and the example I'm going to give of the laundry time study is Eve is, as you probably already saw through the other webinar, is very observant. She noticed that people at several locations of her facilities were spending a lot of time during the laundry process of folding towels, blankets, and other items. And she went over to the staff and said, "Do you think the dog cares if the towel is folded?"
Mm-mm.
And probably not. And the staff was still pushing back. So what to cut to the chase, she said, "Well, let's try this. Why don't you do a time study of what it's taking you to wash and fold all these towels, blankets, etc. right now?" And then why don't you come up with something else? And they came up with, well, let's take a bin, like a plastic garbage can or something like that. And instead of folding them, just throw all the towels or blankets in the designated bin. Don't fold it, just throw them in there as if you were playing basketball. And here's what she found out. Her laundry folding time study cut 6 minutes per laundry load, and they do 22 daily loads by tossing clean laundry into labeled bins rather than folding. So you hear a lot about AI and technology these days, but this is a very low-tech innovation example multiplied over time, which produces huge cost savings for her facility. And who knows, if you have the same situation, maybe you could do the same.
Do you have time for a question, Alex?
Sure.
So industrial engineer here. Can you please explain to the group that time studies are intended to measure how long something should take versus how long it does take in current operations? Also, maybe the theoretical explanation of value add versus non-value add, just for anybody who isn't fully integrated in that sort of background.
Sure, I will do my best. So, the first part of the question totally resonates. You're saying, I think the question was what it should take and what it does take. Well, one of the things that I'm going to talk about in a little while, but it's great to bring up the question now, is how long something should take is something that you need to figure out. And that typically means you need to do time studies at least two, if not more times, because to figure out how something should take, you need to factor in variables of different employees are going to do things at different speeds, depending on what time of year or seasonality or those types of things. So, yes, one of the benefits of doing time studies is to actually measure what it takes. And then once you measure it a couple of times, then you can figure out what it should take. And I would say the third element, which I've mentioned several times, is not what the boss thinks it should take. It's what it should be after you've done the time studies and determine how much it really takes. And what was the second part of the question, Beth?
Explanation between value add versus non-value add in processes.
Okay, well, I'm not sure I'll have the exact same definition that this engineer does. So if I say something that is different, I would love to hear from he or she to hear what they think. But value add in my opinion, is something that you're doing with a process to make it more valuable to either the people who are performing it and or very often it is adding value to the end customer. For example, with the laundry thing, the dogs didn't care whether the blankets or the towels are folded. So that would be a non-value added, which is the folding of it. But the not folding them and just throwing them into something that gave the dog more time with the staff, that would be value add. And but again, if I didn't answer the question the way the engineer did, because I'm not an engineer, I would love to hear.
They seem to find your answer very helpful.
Okay. Okay, that's great. So anyway, about Eve, and you might see Eve. She one of her most prominent businesses is Dog Handler Academy. If you see her, you could ask her not only about this time study, but she does all sorts of time studies. The next example we're going to give you is a pet bowl washing time study conducted by Laurie Yost, and she owns two facilities in Pennsylvania, which are located very near where the Hershey Expo is every year. And basically, the situation she was having with her two facilities in Pennsylvania is her staff members were complaining to her that they were spending an awful lot of time washing bowls every day. And if you think about it, in a lodging or boarding situation, you're typically washing two food bowls and one water bowl or three bowls every day per dog, per or cat, per enclosure. So they were complaining they were spending a lot of time on it. They were stressed out. They were spending less time than they thought they should spend with the dogs, and this was also causing some engagement and potentially some retention issues. And so basically, Lori asked her manager, said, "Well, what do you think's going on?" And the manager said, "Well, I guess," which don't worry, that's not the end of the solution because that would not be the right thing. Guessed because the way she observed the staff that if they found a way to switch systems and they had been looking at our product, they could save at least 50% of the labor time, and that was the guess. And that was good enough for Lori, who's the owner. And so Lori instigated a time study, and they found out that they actually could save a lot more than 50%, somewhere in the ballpark of 80%. So to cut to the chase, when they switched to Ken Clay Bowl, they spent way less time washing bowls, and now they spend a lot more time caring for and playing with the dogs. So that's Laurie Yost time study, and that would be a value-added process improvement, both for the dogs as well as for the staff, presumably for the clients. But the third one, not going to spend a lot of time on. And moving on to the next area is you might be saying, well, what makes a good time study? And a good time, this is, I need to spend some good time on this because this is very important. A good time study captures the whole process. And again, this is not just about bowls, but if you look down at the bottom at the tip, if you are thinking about bowls and you only include the time for the sink, you're really missing actually a majority of the hidden labor costs because if you think about it, when you're washing bowls, you have to pick up the bowls, you have to transport them to the cleaning area. You do pre-rinsing, you do washing, you do sanitizing, you do drying, you do sorting, restocking, transporting them back. You need to worry about keeping the cleaning supplies around, the staff time involved. And but my point is, and this is not just for bowls, it's for virtually all the different processes you can look at. You need to make sure that you are including all the steps in the process to make sure that you have a accurate and holistic understanding of the process. And hopefully that makes sense. So that's I think it's important to dwell on that it needs to encompass the whole process. And you might be saying then, well, where should I start with this at my facility? And I wanted to point out in the right-hand column, good starting points. Well, of course, I've already talked about bowl washing. We've talked about laundry. there's enrichment prep, end of day reset, room turnover. There are a lot, and there are lots of other things. But the one point that I do want to make is just pick one. So pick one area to start with and do that one task, do it well. And then once you've been through it and done it, then you can apply the learning for how you did that one, including any improvements, so that going forward you can continue to do them even better. So the message here is just start with one of the process areas, and we're not suggesting you stop at one. We're just saying you start with one and get good at it, and then go from there. And and related to that, and this is probably getting a little bit into the weeds for some of you, maybe not for the engineers, I hope not, but anyway, you need to be clear about what you're measuring and setting up boundaries make the data a whole lot easier to compare, and they make it more useful. So, as an example, you need to define when the task starts, when it ends, like when I gave you that whole stream of things with bowls. It's a long list, which steps are included. So be very clear about all of this so that you are getting all of the all the different steps to make sure you have a comprehensive read in the end. And the one area that I think is good news is you really don't need complicated equipment. People are talking about AI these days and technology, and I'm not dissing those things. Those are important. The good news is you can do as good a job as anybody can probably do in your industry with very simple items. You need a phone so that you have a timer. You need the phone so that you can actually take a video. Because when you take a video of the process, you can not only use it for the time study itself, you can repurpose that video to use as a training tool so that other employees can be taught very easily how to do it. You need a worksheet. You need either a pen and or digital notes. You need a spreadsheet or a calculator. And I say a manager or observer, and that's important just to keep things consistent. And at the bottom of this, and I give credit to our designer, Bridget, who came up with this a while ago. I think the best time study is the one your team will actually complete. Because if you keep the equipment needs simple and easy and straightforward, they're going to be far more likely to want to do one of these. So hopefully that will help you in choosing on how you want to move forward.
Our
Um,
um, our previous commenter also wanted to point out that it's important to understand if an SOP for the task already exists and if the operator is following that SOP. And for anyone who's not sure, an SOP is a standard operating procedure. So knowing if it's being done the way it's supposed to be done is also important.
That is actually an excellent point, and probably my bad. I do get to SOPs towards in a few slides, so my bad for not including it. You should have standard operating procedures, and thank you for bringing that up. And I will talk about it a little bit more, but hopefully the engineer, hopefully she or he can share anything, assuming I leave something out, which is most likely will be the case since I'm not an engineer. But moving on to the next area, I think we talked about this a little bit, and it's very important that you understand that one measurement is not enough. It's not that we want to give more work to people. It's just because if you think about it, the goal is not to catch someone being slow. The goal is to understand the process. And to understand the process, you're going to have to do this at least twice, if not more, because you need to have different staff members. They're going to do it different ways, even if it's under the same SOP. You're going to have differing occupancy levels, different times of days, different days of the week, et cetera, et cetera. And the reason you want to do this twice or more is if you just were to measure it one way, then you would start to have lots of coulda, woulda, shoulda, because you're going to end up getting variations. But when you have when you do it at least two or more times, you can come up with different expectations of what it should take care, what should happen under certain circumstances. Um, moving on to the on this same process in choosing the right staff participants. I think it's important to point out that you should really should include employees who actually perform the task as opposed to managers or somebody else and say, well, how hard can that be? Well, sometimes things are harder, more complex than you think. So it's include employees who actually do the task. Use average staff, not the fastest or not the slowest, because if you just do that, you're going to end up being disappointed quite a few of the occasions if you don't kind of average that out. And it's important to observe normal working conditions. If you're in a holiday time or something like that, and you're doing a time study, then it's important to note that so you can recalibrate for the other times of year. And I do want to stress that again, the goal is not to catch someone being slow. It is to understand the process and to kind of to keep going. Um, it's really important before you even start to get too far into this to communicate the purpose clearly to your staff because time studies work way better when they understand the why. Why are we doing this? If the staff thinks the study is about, firing people, catching mistakes, whatever, the data is going to be distorted. It's not going to be real. And if they understand it is about actually trying to improve the systems, trying to improve their job environment, they are far more likely to want to participate honestly. At least that's our experience. So it's important to point out to them, what you're asking them to measure, why you're doing it, you're going to use the information. Very importantly, what is the goal is, and very importantly, hopefully, this can help reduce staff frustration and improve the workplace. Hopefully that makes sense. And moving on to the next area, what to record during a time study. And again, for some people, this might like a lot on one slide, and we're not saying this will encompass 100% of everything, but just as an example, what to record during a time study, the start time, the finish time, the total time it takes. And that's the number of pets or animals or enclosures that are involved, the staff involved, the supplies used, the equipment, and whether the process back to the should have versus the typical or unusual. And there are other things. We're just putting this on here, and hopefully this will be helpful to some people so that they don't leave out anything important. Um, the next area is to calculate the true cost. And the true cost can mean, anyway, it gets a little bit more complicated than that. And that's why we're saying it becomes very useful when you convert that cost and you from time. And basically a 15 or 20-minute task may not sound like a lot, but if the process you're measuring, if it happens multiple times a day or across multiple staff, if it happens throughout the year, it can become a real operational penalty. And so to make sure that you are making these time and cost analysis as useful as possible, we've heard and we've found that it's important to measure the labor not only per cycle and per pet or animal, but also to calculate the labor hours per day, per week, per month, and per year, because depending on the situation you're in, you might need to be looking at longer periods of time. Hopefully that makes sense to you guys as well. Moving on to the problem solution application. Um, this is where we are going to talk a little bit more about bowl washing. And again, I want to remind everybody that this is not just about bowl washing. It could be about any other process that you have going on at your facility. However, it is one that we are sure after working with clients in all 50 states that bowl washing is a great example because it happens constantly and the labor can really become uh, quite a problem over time. And one of the other thing that we want to stress again is all the different steps involved. You need to look at feeding, cleaning, and all the different steps related to that. And we put in a few more items here that you think you should be looking at when you're doing a bowl washing time study. And as we said before, one of the real bonuses of doing time studies is that it enables you to compare a current process versus an alternative process. And obviously, to evaluate versus an alternative process, you're probably going to have to do a separate time study, but it may be exactly the right thing to do to get you moving in the right direction and make sure you're optimizing the allocation of your labor across different processes. So when we're talking about uh, bowls and feeding dogs and cats. For example, a lot of you are probably using stainless steel bowls today. And then, like Laura Yost in Pennsylvania, you may be wondering, why is my staff spending so much time on them? Well, because you do have repeated actions with washing, sanitizing, sorting, transportation, then the list goes on. And the dish pileup is a problem for quite a few of you. So if when you do that time study and you figure out how much it's all taking, and then let's say, for example, you wanted to consider something like a clean bowl, well, then you could get a very small set of product for a clean bowl and do a very comparable time study for them, and then you can compare what am I doing today versus what it could be in the future. And that's something that we encourage people to do. As and just building on that, building on Clean Bowl as a labor solution example. My guess is there's quite a few of you out there that don't even know what our product is. We have been around for 15 years, and it's a feeding system that we designed to reduce the labor tied in with traditional bowl washing. As you can see at the bottom of the slide, our product is combined of two different elements, the system. There's a sugarcane fiber refill bowl that is compostable and recyclable. And then on top of it, you set a stainless steel frame with a non-skid rubber bottom. And then you put it on top of the refill so that it is spill proof. And so basically what this does is it makes the bowl itself, excuse me, excuse me about that. It makes the bowl itself germ-free and it also makes it spill-proof, so to help you dramatically reduce the labor time you spend washing bowls. And moving into to make sure that you understand how the product works. First thing that happens if you start on the left-hand side of this slide, a dog or cat checks in. You assign a frame to a dog or a cat. You assign one for food, one for water if they're using it for both. You use the sugarcane fiber refills. You can use it for water as and or food. If you need to, you can wipe the frame clean during the stay, and then when you're finished using the refill, you can recycle it, compost it, and even if you throw it in the garbage, it still reduces your carbon footprint versus washing because unlike with washing, when you have to buy, typically you have to be using coal or other fossil fuels to heat water. which this dramatically reduces. And then when the dog or cat checks out, that's when you sanitize the frame. So that's how it works. And in terms of why it works, do we have a question, Beth?
No,
No?
sorry, excuse me.
Okay. And so the way this works, as I was saying before, if you have a pet boarding facility, you're probably washing two food bowls and one water bowl per day. So that's three per day times the 4 day stay is 12. So you're washing 12 bowls and you can go from washing 12 bowls down to sanitizing two clean bowl frames once a pet checks out. So that's an 84% reduction in labor time washing bowls in that example. And just to give you three kind of one-liner summaries from different facilities in the country, Barcaritaville Pet Resort, they have several locations in Texas. They did a time study. They reduced their labor time over 80% washing bowls, and they repurposed that time to use all that extra labor time to dramatically grow their daycare revenue, which also happened to be very profitable. Playful Pups Retreat, which was Lori Yost, we've already talked about them. They achieve better pet health, happier staff, and better profits. And for those of you out there who work for animal shelters, if you know Good Shepherd Humane Society, they reported better pet health and and more time for enrichment to improve their adoption rate in the animal shelter space. And in terms of an action plan, and we're getting gradually closer and closer to the end, for pet resorts, time savings can become all about additional capacity. So for boarding, daycare, grooming, and board and train facilities, this extra labor that you get by spending a lot less time cleaning bowls can support a lot more pet interaction, better shift completion. And I'm going through most of these because these are all important metrics that you should be measuring. And if you can improve them, that's a big deal. You can reduce overtime pressure. ABC Pet Resort in Houston, Texas did that. Better, more consistent feeding routines and better staff morale. And that's obviously an issue for a lot of people. So improving that and basically, what it allows you to do is repurpose all this time to make your pet resort a lot more efficient and improve your profits. If you're an animal shelter, there are some similar benefits. The recovered labor can support a lot more animal care time. You can have better sanitation consistency, as you just heard from in the previous example. You can take all this time that used to be washing dishes and plow that into a lot more enrichment, which can very often result in better adoption rates. And this can also improve medical and behavior support routines. It can reduce staff and volunteer strain and result in better care. So, okay, turning the time study data into action. And I hope the engineer is still listening because after the study, you need to use the results as she or he pointed out to update your standard operating procedures so that the time you spent on the time study is now something that you can use on an ongoing basis. You can use it, you should update your SOPs. You can use it to improve your training. You can adjust your staffing plans, and you can basically, hopefully, reduce some unnecessary steps, and the list goes on. So there are quite a few things that you can do to get the data out of the time study and make your facility a lot more efficient, whether you are for profit or whether you are not for profit. And the real question is, if you were able to recover this time, where would it create the most value? And only you and your staff can answer that question because every business is a little bit different. And if you, after listening to this, if you have any interest in learning more about business efficiency, time studies. We have a page on our website, business efficiency time studies. You can see it at the bottom of the page. Or if you want to scan this QR code, you can go there. We have educational and staff training videos, and we have worksheets and other things that can help you record and lead your own time studies, not only in bowls, but in other areas, and help you
Back
to
from Maria.
become more efficient. So, are we good?
Sorry about that.
Okay, so and then the kind of the we're almost at the end. The key takeaways, and there are quite a few of them. Time studies reveal where staff time is actually going, as opposed to where you think it's going. The repetitive task can create major hidden labor costs, which very often you're not even aware of. And the process does matter, and not just the obvious steps, but everything that you need to go through to get it done right. And assuming you do it right, this can help you improve your workflow, your pricing, your staffing, your training, scheduling, etc. And probably for the umpteenth time, because it's so important, I have to say it, as time studies can be and should be applied across the entire facility. We've talked probably enough about Ken Klingbeil. Hopefully you have a decent understanding about how that can help you become more efficient and reduce your labor needs for bowl cleaning and become more efficient. And we do have a couple of things here. If you're interested in Ken Clean Ball, we are having a raffle. So if you scan this QR code, we're giving away a free test kit. And a test kit has four frames in it, 1, 8, 16, 24, and 32. So one of each one of the frame sizes and 50 refills in each size. And we're also giving away a slow feed starter kit. So if you're interested in that raffle, just scan that and enter your information. If you're interested, if you're really excited and you want to buy some and give them a try, please be sure to use a coupon code you can see on the left-hand side. And basically, if you buy three frame case packs, that's three 20 packs of frames, you'll get a master carton of 500 refills or a 250 slow feed refills for free, and you get free shipping. If that's a little bit too much, but you want to try a test kit, use our coupon code, try test kit. So to save the $25 freight and get it for under $100. This is probably the most important
Oh my
slide
gosh.
in the deck, because without Beth Klein, none of us would be here. So I'm grateful that she's here, and she's turning 29. This is what I understand from today. And so happy birthday, Beth.
Thank you, Alex. That's silly.
And the last thing, not nearly as important as Beth's birthday, but if any of you have any interest in learning more about time studies or anything else we've covered today, or anything you think is related, I would be happy to talk to you. Beth has my phone number and email address, and you can also schedule a meeting. And I wanted to thank all of you for all of your valuable time and listening to us, and we would be happy to try to answer any other questions you might have.
And thank you so much, Alex, for coming. I think for some people, when they hear time study, it sounds a lot more sophisticated and involved than just doing a task and timing it, you
Mhm.
know. So it's a much more, you know, feasible type of project than I think a lot of business owners or managers really expect it to be, and highly valuable. I know for me as a manager here, there's a lot of processes that I either, created the process for or did myself for a long time, but those processes change and evolve as the business grows. And so if it's been several years since I've done that process, going back and doing it again and watching other people do it, those are all parts of the business that are really easy to not prioritize, but can, bring a lot of value back to your business if there are little things that are like, why are we doing it that way? Like, just do that part over here, or this step could be done first, and it saves us 10 minutes per dog bed or whatever you're doing. But yeah, super valuable information. So if anyone has any questions, when we can hop to those, but very thorough, and I feel like all of the information you brought was very digestible. It was easy to understand. I was wondering if this was going to feel like an intimidating topic, if it was going to be like, I don't have time to do all that, but actually it's time well worth, doing, well spent. So I'm actually excited to start some time studies here in, manufacturing dog beds.
Thank you for having me. And again, if somebody is interested in continuing the conversation, we would love to talk with them. And any other questions, we love to answer them now, but we'll obviously take them later.
Yep. And I put your email address and your phone number in the chat that's up at the top. This webinar also gets recorded, and then I'll post it to KurandaPro.com. And so if anybody wants to go back or share it with somebody else, that will all be available at the beginning of next week.
Great.
Okay. Well,
Thank you.
thanks again, everybody, for coming, and thank you, Alex. This was really a really interesting webinar. I'm excited that I got to participate.
All right. Thank you, Bruce. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. Bye.